Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, so in this video, I'd like to talk about something that has really bothered me about Wendy Adelson. Okay, now honestly, there's a lot that bothers me about Wendy Adelson, so it's kind of hard to know where to start. And that's maybe part of the problem with the Adelsons. They kind of hold all their ugliness in such plain sight that there's so much of it that you get lost in it, and then it's almost like you just can't see the truth, and you sort of like they become sort of invisible. Their badness becomes sort of invisible. But if you really think about it, a lot of what they say is really troubling. Okay, and I'm thinking specifically about Wendy Adelson when she was recently testifying just a few weeks ago about the problem of her withholding the children from Dan's parents, Ruth and Phil. Okay, this is the Markel grandparents, right? And how over some petty, I mean, really, it is kind of a petty thing. When people started getting arrested in this case, okay, just a few years after the murder, all right, Ruth Markel, this is the grandparent up in Canada. This is Dan's mother, right? She was concerned that maybe Wendy would be arrested. Okay. And so she was just raising the issue that the kids could be put temporarily in foster care if Wendy were to be arrested. All right. Or around the possibility of Wendy being arrested. Okay. Now I understand. I can understand Wendy being offended by that. Right. I can understand that. But at the same time, a normal person can be totally offended. But at the same time, you can still remember that Ruth Markel, the grandparent, she just lost her child to murder. Okay. Her son was just shot in the head. Okay. I think Wendy should have to see the autopsy photos to sort of remind herself that Ruth Markel just lost her son in an incredibly horrible way. All right. So that even if Wendy is personally offended that the grandmother is suggesting maybe Wendy could go to jail and the kids might have to temporarily be in foster care. Okay. I understand that. She may be offended, but can't you also remember that Ruth Markel just lost her son in almost the most horrific way you can imagine, and that she is being deprived of contact with her grandchildren? So I think it's really just amazing in this recent testimony, just a month ago in the Tallahassee trial. I think it's just amazing how Wendy, with a straight face, is able to maintain this almost like snarky, sarcastic, almost like really disrespectful attitude towards Dan's parents. Okay, and knowing that the context is that this is a trial for his actual murder. Okay, I just think this is just like a staggering lack of respect and an almost unbelievable lack of appreciation for what it must feel like to be a mother who's just lost their son in a violent manner and now is having to work really hard to even have contact with the grandchildren. I mean, just a total lack of respect for what that must be like for Ruth. I mean, that in a sense, I could almost say that this is almost more cruel than killing Dan. Killing Dan was just a simple hit job. It's just a professional thing. They hated each other. They were in a divorce. They were enemies. They were ex husband and wife, but they basically hated each other. So, whatever level of hate to kill him, but I think it's even almost more of a hate crime, if you want to say that. I say that poetically, right? A hate crime, but it's almost like more of a hate crime to like torture an old woman, to torture an old grandmother who's just lost her child to murder, and to play these petty games about how she's resentful that the mother is suggesting the kids could be in foster care. And so, you know what? I'm not going to let you see the kids for 6 years or whatever it is. You can play with the numbers, but the bottom line is Wendy is able to inflict this incredibly hurtful, vindictiveness on Ruth Markel. And I mean, it's almost like, in a way, it's almost more cruel than murdering someone, if you really think about it. And also think about what this is doing to Ruth Markel. I think whatever her heart condition has been, it's probably gotten a lot worse, not just because she lost her son, but because she's having to fight to see her grandchildren. And her grandchildren, they've had their last name changed. And it's almost like just like this naked hostility and like cruelty, this cruelty towards Ruth Markel. So it's just amazing how Wendy is able to express this obscene cruelty. I mean, it's just obscene cruelty.
What was wrong with Dan's mother trying to make arrangements for the kids in the event of your arrest? Wasn't that a kind thing to do?
I don't think it's kind to put my children in foster care. I know that my children don't belong in foster care.
How many times have the kids visited Dan's parents since this murder?
Many. It can be hard to count.
Countless times?
Countless times. We've had a lot of Skype visits. They do live in Canada, so it makes it a little bit harder to have in-person visitation. But every time they've asked for it, we've arranged it.
Every time they've asked for a visit, you've arranged it.
Yes, ma'am.
How many times have they seen him in the last 5 years?
Again, we
Countless?
as in the last 5 years, that overlaps with the time when they tried to put them in foster care.
Hasn't the issue of them trying to get access to your kids been a major issue, at least for them?
Since they tried to put the children in foster care, yes.
Are you familiar with their work across the street at the legislature trying to get bills passed to give grandparents rights to see kids?
I'm familiar with their grandparents' legislation, but it's actually unconstitutional.
But she does it with this sort of like NPR podcast, authentic woman vocal fry.
Talking while female. Okay, so why do women sound like they do?
I don't know if you guys know or if you guys recognize this sort of vocal fry that like a liberal women or, progressive women use.
And you're listening to The Delicious Dish on National Public Radio. Can you believe it, Terry? After a long, hot summer, it's finally turtleneck time again.
And of course, we've seen this made fun of in Saturday Night Live, how they make fun of NPR and, that kind of like liberal woman voice fry or vocal fry. But basically, it's actually a really interesting tone of voice that women can use. And it can be abused, too, because it's basically that voice, that kind of like a liberal woman vocal fry, whatever, that voice is sort of used as it's like the voice of virtue signaling. It's been adopted and we accept it culturally as the voice of virtue signaling. And when people use that voice, it's sort of a code. It's sort of code signaling for saying, I am an authentic woman and I'm now bearing witness to a sacred truth. So it's very powerful. It's almost like witchcraft, actually, because this is a culturally accepted vocal fry. It's like a vocal tone, but it code signals and it signals to us very deeply this idea of an authentic woman bearing witness to a sacred truth. Okay, so that's like, in the wrong hands, with the right manipulation, that can be like abused almost like a witchcraft, because it's a very powerful code signal. Okay, this vocal fry, this tone. And if we listen to Wendi Adelson's podcast way back when she was taking her creative writing class, okay, you can see that she uses the same kind of like podcast vocal fry. They almost go crazy. It's almost like they're having bulimia. They're just like stuffing themselves with this, just like this podcast vocal fry. And she's basically saying these really terrible things. I mean, it's incredible. She actually makes like a creative writing plaything of the device of playing humorously with the play on words that her late ex-husband is like a latex husband. And it becomes like this toy. And she just kind of plays with it like a cat would play with a cat's toy. But she's playing with the subject matter of her husband having been murdered. I think it's just chilling. But you can't sense the psychopathy of it. You can't sense the evil of it because she's presenting it through this gracious, this very fashionable podcast vocal fry, where what you're hearing the authentic woman bearing witness to the truth. But that's just the illusion because she's using this culturally powerful code signal. Okay, so let's listen to that.
Today on our show, we're going to give you Wendi, the way she revealed herself in the first semester. Wendi wrote about her ex-husband's murder.
On July 18th, 2014, someone shot my ex-husband in the head while he was pulling into our garage after he dropped our then 3- and 4-year-old sons off at school. I only found out this information when the police picked me up from a lunch date I was having with 2 girlfriends and insisted that I come with them back to the station and then interrogated me for 8 straight hours, because it's usually the ex-wife. And then I was supposed to take my brain cancer surviving just turned 70 father on a trip to Machu Picchu.
10 months ago, someone killed the father of my children. First we got divorced, and then he got murdered. In casual conversations, I don't know whether to call him my ex-late spouse or my late ex-spouse, except that late ex-spouse sounds like latex spouse. I do believe he loved me the best way he knew how. I mean, he didn't like fiction, so why read my novel? It was logic, not a lack of love. It feels sacrilegious these days, even to suggest something less than heroic about my latex husband.
And with that same culturally sacred vocal fry, that podcast vocal fry of female authenticity, to also inflict terrible cruelty on Dan's mother, on your children's grandmother, you know.
In the last 5 years, that overlaps with the time when they tried to put them in foster care.
Hasn't the issue of them trying to get access to your kids been a major issue, at least for them?
Since they tried to put the children in foster care, yes.
Are you familiar with their work across the street at the legislature trying to get bills passed to give grandparents rights to see kids?
I'm familiar with their grandparents' legislation, but it's actually unconstitutional.
And so it's just amazing how, you know, there are people who can use a culturally sacred code signal, okay, this culturally sacred virtue signal, okay, which we will take subconsciously to be really like a delivery of authentic truth, but to use that to deliver, you know, really almost unthinkable cruelty to the mother of somebody who was killed the way Dan was killed. So, you know, I mean, I don't even really know how to comment on this because, you know, I honestly don't really know what Wendy's actual diagnosis is or what her psychology is, because maybe what she's doing is she's just desperate not to be on the hook for this, right? Maybe she's just desperate not to be on the hook. So she'll use whatever dishonest devices she can, even to convince herself, you know. So I don't know that makes her an absolute psychopath, but I will say she is effectively delivering tremendous cruelty through the device of something that we take in our culture to be a signal for almost extreme authenticity. So she's using the device, a cultural device of extreme honesty, to deliver, I think, almost extreme cruelty, you know, almost like on a moral level, like a hate crime. So I think that's really interesting. Anyway, really appreciate your patience and thanks for watching.